The Jets take on the Giants in their second exhibition game of 2025, and all eyes will be on Justin Fields. But the most important part of this game for the Jets is the play of the offensive line. Locked On Jets begins now.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, August 15th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Today we are previewing the Jets' second preseason game of 2025. They take on the New York Giants tomorrow night at MetLife Stadium. The annual exhibition battle between the two New York teams. Kickoff time is scheduled for 7 p.m. Eastern at MetLife Stadium. The game will be shown locally both on WCBS2, which is the Jets feed, and WNBC4, which is the Giants feed. On today's show, we are going to break down the key parts of this game. I think there are three key groups of players to watch in this one. One group are the guys who are just trying to hold on, trying to show the Jets they deserve a roster spot. The second group are players who had a strong week one in the preseason against Green Bay and are trying to build on that. And then there's the trenches, and that's where we are going to begin. Now, I think that heading into this game, as always with the New York Jets in 2025, there's going to be a lot of focus on how Justin Fields plays, and we will have sweeping conclusions drawn from a handful of snaps. But I'm more interested in the way the offensive line looks and the defensive line looks. And there are different reasons for the offensive line and the defensive line getting my focus. On the offensive line, John Simpson is back in the lineup. He missed the first exhibition game against Green Bay. He was dealing with a back injury. So this is the first time we will see the Jets starting offensive line on the field together in a game scenario in 2025. Last week in Green Bay, because Simpson was out, the Jets just a little remaneuvering on their offensive line. Josh Myers played center, and Joe Tippmann moved from center to left guard. With Simpson back in the lineup, I think we can presume that we're going to see a starting five of Olu Fashanu at left tackle, Simpson at left guard, Tippmann at center, even though there's still nominally that position battle going on, Elijah Vera Tucker at right guard, and Armand Membou at right tackle. And I think that there are a lot of reasons you should play your starters in the preseason. And if you doubt that, I will refer you to the film of week one in any of the last, 5 NFL seasons to show you how sloppy things are. Teams have gotten away from playing their starters during the exhibition season. And I think the results are clear early in the season based on how sloppy things are in this league, because teams aren't getting their reps in. They're not getting their game reps in. They're not working things out. And I think that Aaron Glenn playing his starters during the exhibition season is a good thing. Will it make a huge difference? Will it turn the Jets from, a 5-win team into a Super Bowl team? No. But it's the type of thing that I think could make them sharper in week one. And I think that there's no area on a football team where those reps are more significant than on the offensive line. We talk about this all the time on the show, and I'm not the only football analyst who tells you this, that the offensive line is not just a collection of 5 players. It's a team. It's a group. You could have 5 of the best, most talented guys in the NFL. If they don't know how to work together, your offensive line is going to struggle. You could have 5 guys who are just kind of mediocre, but if they work together, the whole will be greater than the sum of the parts. And this is an opportunity for these guys to work together in game action. And if you look across the NFL these days, if you ever go to like a training camp practice, the intensity level is not as high as it used to be. And there's a very good reason for this. The players negotiated that practices at training camp will be less intense. No more 2-a-days, no more morning practice than afternoon practice. There's only 1 a day now. There's one practice. You either practice in the morning or the afternoon, and that's it. And there's also less hitting going on. These are the things the players negotiated because the players didn't like this stuff. And that's the players' right, and the owners agreed to it. So, you can't complain about it. But it makes it much more difficult to prepare for the season. And these exhibition games are really the only opportunity you get to get going at full game speed. And I'm not expecting these guys to play that much, maybe a couple series, maybe a quarter, but I do think it's the type of thing that can help because you start to get stuff on film. You get you get action at game speed. And if you mess up passing off a stunt or something like that, if the communication's not great, you can go back to the film. And that's something you can emphasize going forward. It's something that will help you work things through. One of the things I always talk about is you shouldn't go crazy with happiness if the Jets play great in the preseason, and you shouldn't be really upset if they play poorly in the preseason, because what this is really for is preparing for the year, preparing for the regular season. And if something goes wrong, it gives you an opportunity to fix it before it actually hurts your team. If you don't play your starters in the preseason and something goes wrong week one, it actually impacts your team. If something goes wrong in the preseason, you can fix it for week one. So a good opportunity for the Jets to get that first team offensive line out there, get them some reps and see what they need to work on. And then on the defensive line, I'm focused on some of the guys there, and it's not so much how they work together. It's not so much about chemistry. It's just a question of who's going to earn more playing time, particularly at the defensive tackle spot. Defensive tackle is a question mark for the Jets. We know Quinnen Williams is not a question mark, but everybody after Quinnen Williams is a big question mark. And we started to see some guys last week against Green Bay begin to separate themselves. Leonard Taylor, who was one of the stars of preseason in 2024, who went from being an undrafted rookie to earning a roster spot, had another really strong performance. He had a strip sack that turned into a touchdown. Another guy the Jets brought in this offseason who was kind of under the radar, JayTeeVee, looked excellent in that first preseason game. And I always separate, I think you can't evaluate guys solely on the box score. Tufele had a sack and a half, that looks great. But the question is, were these numbers produced in a way that's repeatable going forward? Because sometimes, you get a sack and you're just kind of in the right place at the right time. The quarterback runs right into you, and even though you've been stonewalled by an offensive lineman. Tufele was showing good technique. He was winning. Tufele is not a guy who's been a great player through the course of his career, but there's a real opening right here. There's not a lot proven behind Quinnen. Somebody's going to have to get those defensive tackle snaps this year. Jets brought in a couple of other guys in free agency, Coward and Nandi, but I'm not really high on either of those guys. And I think that first of all, I think that there's a real path for Leonard Taylor to be the second defensive tackle on this team. And I think he's the one guy who still has enough runway in his career, who has enough upside to be a quality number 2 defensive tackle. But beyond that, you're still going to have to give rotational guys some snaps. And very possible Tufele, maybe found something, but he needs to keep building on it. One preseason game's not enough. One of the things that happens every year is there's always one standout from the first exhibition game who plays a great game, and then games 2 and 3, they're much quieter. And by the time cutdown day comes, you've forgotten all about that first exhibition game. In the NFL, it's true in the preseason, it's true in the regular season. It's great to have a big game, but it doesn't mean anything unless you build on it. But at the defensive tackle spot for the Jets, playing time's available because Quinnen's the only guy who is going to get a heaping share of the playing time. So Tufele's got an opportunity, even though he's a guy who really hasn't, been a big-time player through much of his career to this date. He's a guy who's got an opportunity to really carve out a role on this team. And the same is true of Leonard Taylor. So different reasons that the focus is on the offensive line and the defensive line for the Jets. On the offensive line, we know who the starters are going to be. It's really about, it's outside of the Tippmann-Myers thing. I'm assuming Tippmann's going to get the starting job, but it's about building chemistry. It's about working together. It's about, getting some reps at game speed. On the defensive line, it's about showing who's going to be the guy standing next to Quinnen Williams more often than not. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll continue talking about Giants preseason week 2. There are some other players to watch. And just like Tufele, a lot of these guys are players who are trying to carve out a role on this team, had a strong preseason week 1 and are looking to build on it. We'll talk about some more of those guys as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I have to admit, one thing I'm really bad at is signing up for subscriptions. and then kind of forgetting about them. I don't really use the subscription, have streaming services, happens so many other parts in my life. Monarch Money can help you if you're like me, and in so many other ways. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and Locked On Jets are playing Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. Me, I've played Yahoo Fantasy for over 2 decades, and the updates they're rolling out this month are wild, and I mean that in the best way. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. And to kick it off, they just dropped the Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season right around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. Or if you're more into the classics, you can still play head-to-head, private leagues, or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. The second of 3 preseason games for the New York Jets in 2025 will be played tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. The game will be shown locally on WCBS2 in New York, which is the Jets feed. And there's also going to be a Giants feed, WNBC4 in New York. So two different ways you can watch the game. But if you're a Jets fan, you want a Jets focused coverage, of course, our friend Ian Eagle and Mark Sanchez will call the game on Channel 2 locally. On today's show, we are focused on players to watch in this game for the New York Jets. And breaking down these exhibition games is different from breaking down a regular season game, because regular season game, you're really focused on the end result. You're focused, do the Jets win or lose? Whereas the exhibition games are more about individual performances. They're used to prepare for the season, but they're also used to sort out position battles. They're used to sort out roster battles. A big performance can really make an impact on coaches as they decide who to keep on the 53-man roster. And there are some players who I thought had very promising week 1 performances against the Green Bay Packers. But now they need to build on them because these players' roster spots and their roles are not guaranteed. First guy I'll start with is Donovan Edwards, the undrafted free agent signing out of Michigan. And I hate to, cause people who are excited about a player to maybe calm down a bit. But I do think the Donovan Edwards hype train's gotten a little out of control after that first preseason game against the Packers. And look, he played really well. He had a number of tough runs. He had a 73-yard touchdown run that kind of got wiped off by a holding penalty. But even on that play, it showed you that he has an extra gear, that he's a potential home run threat. And I do think Donovan Edwards should make the team. If it was up to me, I would keep him on the team. And I do think he will make the team. I would not be surprised to see the Jets keep 4 running backs. It's going to be a run-heavy team. It is a team without great depth at the wide receiver position. So why would you not keep an extra running back? But I do feel like the fan base is getting a little ahead of itself with Donovan Edwards for proclaiming him the next great running back. In fact, on my website this week, somebody in the comments said that he was listening to WFAN, and the topic came up on WFAN: could the Jets keep Breece Hall? Could the Jets cut Breece Hall and keep Donovan Edwards over him? And the answer to that is no. And if you're asking, should the Jets cut Breece Hall and keep Donovan Edwards over him, I would say that would be the craziest idea I've ever heard of. So I think that we're getting a little overboard with the Donovan Edwards hype based on one preseason game. But it was a very good preseason game. I do think Edwards is going to be a guy who fits more of like a receiving back role. He's a guy who's kind of struggled reading blocks through his career in college, but he's shown, first of all, breakaway speed. And he's also shown some receiving ability. So I think of him as a back in the mold of a Darren Sproles. This is if it goes well. I'm not saying he's going to be Darren Sproles, but I'm saying the style of play where Darren Sproles, you may remember, was a great receiving back with the number of teams, the Chargers, the Saints, the Eagles. or maybe more realistically, like a Shane Vereen, who was a very reliable option for Tom Brady in New England. Wasn't quite on Sproles' level, but was a very solid receiving back for New England for a number of years. I think if it goes well for Edwards, that's the type of back he's going to be. And again, I'm not saying that's what he's going to be. I'm just saying like that's the style of player I think he's going to be. So you want to see him build on that week 1 performance. And I'd like to see the Jets get him more involved in the passing game, because at the end of the day, I don't think he's going to be a guy who takes a lot of carries. I think what he showed last week is, he's got a little extra gear to him. And if you can utilize that in the pass, you can utilize that speed in the passing game, get him matched up one-on-one against linebackers. That's where I think Edwards would have a chance to not only make the team, but perhaps make an impact as a role player going forward. Another guy I got my eye on, Stone Smart. This was a guy the Jets brought in this offseason from the Chargers. Interesting profile, converted college quarterback, first converted to wide receiver, then converted to tight end. So a guy who has changed positions twice in recent years. Actually put together a couple decent games with the Chargers a year ago. But I'm sure if you're an NFL fan, you know that when you're converting a college quarterback to a different position, sometimes it works out, but that's not that often. Smart did have a 24-yard touchdown catch on a screen last week, and I think that was significant for a couple of reasons. Number one, Jets tight end room is not in great shape right now. I think that we've got a rookie with some interesting potential in Mason Taylor. So I'm not going to include Mason Taylor in that mix, but Mason Taylor's also a rookie. And as we know with rookies, sometimes they step on the field and are great right away, but more often it takes some time. It takes some seasoning. After Mason Taylor, I mean, there is not a lot there. You want to talk Jeremy Ruckert, you want to talk Zach Kuntz. You have guys who really haven't performed a whole lot. So there's a real opportunity for someone like Stone Smart, a couple of years into the league, who's spent some time developing, to potentially claim a role on this team. But the second reason Smart caught my eye was that touchdown. It wasn't just the fact he scored a touchdown. It was the type of play he did it on, which was he caught a screen pass. And I think the Jets are really going to have to lean into the screen game this year, because they don't have a quarterback who's a traditional drop back passer in Justin Fields. And they don't have a great group of wide receivers who can beat defensive backs on routes. So I think that to move the ball, the Jets are going to need to throw screens at a really high rate. And if you have a tight end who can catch a screen and take it 24 yards for a touchdown, that's a big thing. But the question is, can Stone Smart build on that? Third guy I have my eye on is Adrien Martinez. And Martinez, I think, is going to play most of this game, because Fields will play whatever, a couple series. The Jets will just work him. Jets will give Fields as much time as they think he needs to get the reps that are necessary to prepare him for week 1. After that, Tyrod Taylor's injured, so Tyrod Taylor's out the rest of the preseason. Brady Cook, who's the other quarterback, also got hurt. So Adrien Martinez is probably going to see a decent amount of playing time. I will say, I think Adrien Martinez improved a lot from a preseason a year ago. A year ago, he did some good things in the 2024 preseason, but he was a guy who was kind of like looking to run at every opportunity. Like, I think there were points last year in the exhibition season where I don't even think he was getting to his first read before he was taking off and running. He looked a lot better last weekend against Green Bay. He looked like a guy who was comfortable moving in the pocket. He looked like a guy who he would run, but it was only like as a last resort. I'm not saying Adrien Martinez is going to be more than the number 3 quarterback, but I think it's conceivable Adrien Martinez has developed into a decent number 3 quarterback. And what do I expect from a number 3 quarterback? A guy who can run a handful of plays, who can maybe keep your offensive flow for 2 quarters, 3 quarters, maybe a full game before eventually the other team figures him out. Based on what I saw last week, I think there's a possibility Adrien Martinez could be at a point where he's at least a credible option as a number 3 quarterback. And that's not a lot to ask. If I was asking Adrien Martinez to be my starting quarterback, even if I was asking Adrien Martinez to be a good backup, I'm not sure he's there yet. But there was clear improvement by Martinez. I think he was clearly better than Brady Cook last week. I think that he's clearly at this point the front runner to be the number 3 quarterback, and an opportunity to get some extra reps, get these game reps that he won't get when the regular season comes around, and continue to develop, continue to grow, and continue to show that he's the guy who should be the number 3 quarterback on this team. Now, during the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to another group of players. And these are players who are very much on the roster bubble right now and need to show this Jets coaching staff something, anything, to justify a roster spot on the 53-man roster. We'll talk about who they are as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel it up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink minus the alcohol into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. And golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best part of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-hour energy shots today. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Friday. We're getting ready for preseason week 2 action. Jets and Giants will play tomorrow night at MetLife Stadium. They don't have the Snoopy Trophy anymore. I mean, you may remember many, many years ago, the winner of this game won a trophy with Snoopy on it because MetLife sponsors the stadium and Snoopy was the mascot of MetLife. So no trophy on the line tomorrow night in the Jets-Giants preseason game, but a lot on the line for the players on these two teams, particularly the New York Jets. Only 2 opportunities left for players to impress the coaching staff and stake a claim to a roster spot in an actual game situation. And there are some Jets players who are on the roster bubble right now who I think need to produce. And I think at the top of that list would be last year's 3rd-round pick, Malachi Corley. And we've talked a lot about Corley on this podcast over the last couple of months. He's in a very precarious situation. You know, even though he was a 3rd-round pick a year ago, he wasn't the 3rd-round pick of Aaron Glenn. He wasn't the 3rd-round pick of Darren Mucci. He was the 3rd-round pick of Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas. So Glenn and Mucci don't have anything invested in Corley right now. And that makes a difference. You may remember when Joe Douglas was first hired in 2019, he cut Ja'Kai Polite, who was the Jets' 3rd-round pick that year. He was a rookie 3rd-round pick, and Douglas cut him. And I can guarantee you Douglas would not have cut Polite if Douglas had picked him. But Polite was picked by Mike McCagnon. Much easier to cut the previous guy's 3rd-round pick than your own. And a lot of this goes back to, Corley, first of all, not really doing a whole lot as a rookie. Really, the only memorable play he had was the Halloween night, Thursday night game against the Texans, where he dropped the ball on the 1-yard line and rolled out of the end zone when he was about to score a touchdown. But it's also about skill set, where Corley was just a really raw player when the Jets drafted him. And I think it's fair to say, it was probably a pretty big overdraft to pick him at the very top of the 3rd round. And we could talk a lot about that being one of a lot of flaws of Joe Douglas's that were exposed with that pick. But, it's not really a question of whether Corley was the 3rd-round pick. And I see people saying, well, why would you give up on a player after 1 year? And the answer to that is you might have an undrafted free agent who's got more upside. When the Jets cut Polite, they kept a guy named Kyle Phillips, and not that Kyle Phillips has turned into an NFL star, but he's had a couple of good years for the Jets as a defensive end, particularly as a run stopper. Just because a guy's a UDFA doesn't necessarily mean he has less upside than a 3rd-round pick. You have to evaluate these things as they come. There are a couple of UDFAs, Pritchett being one of them, who have impressed the Jets through training camp, and they may have more upside than Malachi Corley. Last week against Green Bay, Corley had 1 catch, and then he ran a ball out on a kickoff return. He took a ball out of the end zone that he should not have taken out. And I'm sure part of this with Corley is he knows he's in trouble, so he was trying to make something happen. But you also have to be disciplined. Sometimes you try and do too much when you know you're in trouble. You try and make a play to impress the coaching staff, but you also have to play smart. And I don't know that Corley really did a whole lot to help his cause last week. Time's running out for Malachi Corley. He's got to make something happen sooner rather than later. Beyond that, Quantis Stickers, who I really liked what Quantis Stickers did as a special teamer last week. A couple tackles. And one of the things we talked about after that game is Stickers' trajectory changed a lot when Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh got fired. Robert Saleh was very high on Quantis Stickers. In fact, it seemed very possible Saleh was training him to take over for DJ Reed. The Jets knew they were probably going to lose DJ Reed in free agency this offseason. Stickers may have been trained to take over that starting role. Well, Saleh, of course, is gone. Again, you were the previous regime's project, which means that when the new regime comes in, you got to prove yourself. Jets came in, they signed Muji and Glenn came in, they signed Brandon Stevens in free agency and drafted Adrien Thomas. And I think it's fair to say that this new regime probably views Adrien Thomas as the future starter, not Quantis Stickers. But Stiggers went out and had a really solid game on special teams. And if there's not a path to playing time at corner right now for Stiggers, which there's not, his path to the roster is through special teams because he can make an impact there. And the Jets have a lot of interesting guys in coverage on coverage units who are vying for the roster. Another one is Jammarcus Weston. This guy's been like one of my favorites since the Jets signed him as a UDFA. And this is going to be a guy who's not really going to play on offense or defense. You know, in Florida, they tried to use him at multiple spots. I mean, this is the rare guy who's a good enough athlete that the Gators in college tried to put him a wide receiver, safety, and defensive end. Aren't a lot of guys who have that combo. He could never really find a role on offense or defense, but he was an excellent special teamer. His coach, Billy Napier, mentioned he's going to make the NFL based on his special teams ability. This is going to be a guy of the mold of like a Justin Hardy, where, you know, I don't know if you remember Justin Hardy was with the Jets for a couple of years early in the Saleh regime. And, you know, Hardy was listed as a corner. He wasn't really a corner, though. He was a coverage guy, or like an Irv Charles, who, you know, Irv Charles is listed as a wide receiver. He's a special teamer. You know, Irv Charles is never going to play wide receiver for the Jets unless it's like an emergency situation with a million injuries. I don't think Jammarcus Weston would ever play on offense or defense for the Jets unless, you know, there were even if there were a million injuries, because he doesn't have a natural position. But if he plays well in this game, he's got a chance to draw the attention of the coaching staff and earn a roster spot. And if not a roster spot, at least a chance to get on the practice squad. And if he gets on the practice squad, he'll probably get called up for his special teams work a couple early games, which could eventually lead to a roster spot in the longer run. And the last guy I have my eye on is Harrison Mevis, who I really liked what he did last week. I mean, he made all his kicks. There's been some criticism of Mevis, though, because he barely made some of those kicks. I mean, some of those kicks were a little shaky. And I guess that's fair, but to me, he made them. So, you know, I'm not going to criticize the guy until he starts missing them. But Mevis's spot on the roster is probably a long shot. It's probably, yeah, he probably doesn't have a great shot of being on the initial 53-man roster. And Nick Folk's here, unless Folks dramatically starts showing his age soon. And there's been no sign of Folk, you know, even though Folk is, you know, 40, there's been no sign of decline from Folk. He's been one of the best kickers in the NFL the last couple of years. I don't think Mevis really has a shot to be the Jets opening day kicker without, you know, either just a full vast regression over the next couple of weeks or some sort of injury. But look, Mevis has a shot to put good film out there. You know, that's the thing. The thing with a kicker, being a kicker, is that it's true of every other position, but it's especially true of kicker, because there's always an injury during the season where some team needs a kicker. Mevis has an opportunity to impress other teams. And I'm a big believer that you should keep a kicker on your practice squad these days, because there are injuries at the kicker spot. And people who have played this role, people who have been special teamers, people who have been kickers, will tell you that there's a certain chemistry you need to develop between your long snapper, your holder, and your kicker on field goal attempts and extra point attempts. And I think that there's value to be had to somebody who's practicing with the same long snapper and holder every day. If Mevis makes those kicks, I think at the very least he'll earn a spot in the Jets practice squad as the backup kicker, if not more. Unless very possible he'll find a spot on another team. But, you know, for the Jets purposes, I don't think he's going to make the roster, but still a lot on the line for Mevis, and something on the line for the Jets to see whether he can be the number 2 kicker, a guy they can count upon if anything happens to Folk during the season. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on the podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the game. We'll be back on Monday to break down what happens between the Giants and the Jets at MetLife Stadium. Exhibition game number 2 in 2025.